Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is expected to announce his run for president in 2024 sometime next week. On Thursday, he took a swipe at former President Trump, and he's allegedly telling donors on a call that there are only 3 candidates for 2024 who are credible. He said Trump, Biden, and DeSantis himself. According to a New York Times reporter who listened in, he said this: "I think of those 3, 2 have a chance to get elected president, Biden and me. Based on all the data in the swing states, which is not great for the former president and probably insurmountable because people are not going to change their view of him." Now, Trump's been firing back on that, and he's been posting pretty regularly on Truth Social, his own social media. He wrote on Friday this, he said, quote, "Sorry, but Ron DeSanctimonious is unelectable, and everyone knows why. I'm leading Biden by 11 points. And polls are very much on Trump's side as well. A Rassmussen poll on Wednesday actually showed Republican voters are still heavily on board with Trump. It has Trump at 62% of the vote, DeSantis at 17%, Mike Pence at 6%, Nikki Haley at 5%, and then down from there. In other words, folks, if you took all the other candidates, combined all of them to like a super candidate, Trump would still beat them in the polls. It's similar even in Florida, where DeSantis is governor. A poll of voters in the state by Florida Atlantic University, it found that Trump even beats DeSantis in Florida 59-31. Even the New York Times has actually noted the change. It reported that in the 6 months from November until now, quote, Mr. DeSantis' 2024 run has faltered before it has even begun. It notes this: allies have abandoned him. Tales of his icy impersonal touch have spread. Donors have groused, and a legislative session in Tallahassee designed to burnish his conservative credentials has instead coincided with a drop in the polls. Now, New York Times does appear to believe DeSantis can make a comeback, at least once the campaign starts rolling. But where DeSantis does win big, with Republican voters at least, is in his strong stance against woke culture. DeSantis has taken one of the strongest stances among governors in the country against, transsexual policies, against the accusations of sexualizing children, and against the anti-American education that's going through our school system. He's going head-to-head with Disney doing many of these things. And he has likewise taken on other key issues in the culture war against progressivism. Now, for Republicans, this is a winning topic. According to an April 2023 Wall Street Journal poll, Republican voters care more about ending woke culture than they even do about things like, keeping Medicare, for example. But the big question is whether this reflects in who voters actually go to the polls for in 2024. And Trump made a point to call out Ron DeSantis on the polls. He wrote this on Truth Social. He said, "After campaigning for 5 months and going nowhere but down, it looks like Ron DeSanctimonious will soon be entering the race. He has 0 chance, and MAGA will never forget." Now, what will MAGA or Trump supporters never forget? Trump's actually not really clear on what he's saying here in terms of what he means. Trump's been saying, though, that his endorsement for DeSantis during the Florida elections is the reason Ron DeSantis actually won the gubernatorial race. Now, the polls actually back that up, and Trump generally claims basically that Ron DeSantis is a MAGA phenomenon who wouldn't be able to take on the man who made him. The big elephant in the room, though, at least on polling, is that Ron DeSantis actually fumbled after Trump was indicted in New York over the Stormy Daniels case. Remember, before that, Ron DeSantis was polling really well. Trump really at that time had been pushed mostly out of the spotlight by corporate media. And then Soros DA Alvin Bragg did something that ironically pushed Trump to the forefront. What did he do? Well, he elevated misdemeanor charge against Trump that was already past the statute of limitations, turned that one charge into multiple felonies, using an excuse that Trump broke a law that Bragg notably didn't even state, and then forced Trump to show up in New York City to face charges for all of those. Now, when that happened, you know what else happened? The Republican establishment that until then really looked like it was anti-Trump. They were turning against him or not even showing him or cutting out from broadcasts when he was speaking. That establishment came out to support Trump. Even Mike Pence, who generally, these days at least, holds that Trump is an insurrectionist who endangered his life, came out to defend Trump against Alvin Bragg. Watch.
I think the unprecedented indictment of a former president of the United States for a campaign finance issue is an outrage. And I think it's clear to the overwhelming majority of the American people that this is nothing short of a political prosecution being affected by a Manhattan DA who literally campaigned on bringing charges against one particular American.
Now remember, it was in light of that voters were wondering, well, if, hey, Mike Pence says, is reacting this way, how is Ron DeSantis going to respond? They looked to Ron DeSantis. I mean, after all, he's the governor of Florida, where Trump is a resident and where Trump could be extradited from. And then what did Ron DeSantis do when even the aggressive anti-Trumpers on the right were defending him? DeSantis chose to stay out of it. He chose to stay silent, and that caused a public backlash, followed by a drop in the polls. And only then did Ron DeSantis come out to condemn the charges against Trump and state that Florida would not cooperate. But really, it was too late. Trump surged past DeSantis in the polls because of that. The Florida governor fell from the GOP frontrunner for 2024. He lost 26 percentage points in the polls. And the public spotlight shifted right to Trump. Now, as ironic as it sounds, Alvin Bragg may go down in history, at least for winning Trump the Republican nomination. And what we could call at this point the Bragg effect could even continue to propel Trump further into the spotlight and even higher in the polls as new charges, ironically, are brought against Trump. In Georgia, for example, it's now suspected the Fulton County District Attorney, Fannie Willis, is clearing the way for charges against Trump as well. But contrary to the narrative that criminal charges, investigations, and the like are going to actually harm Trump, based on what we've seen so far, it ironically appears to be having the opposite effect. Especially now that we've seen the Durham report and seen evidence of how the FBI colluded with the DNC and the Obama administration to launch a fake investigation into Trump. You know what that does? That frames all these things in that light. For voters, the charges and allegations are all starting to meld together. All these cases are becoming one giant get Trump conspiracy. The details of them, all these accusations, are getting lost in the noise of something much, much louder. And what is that? It's the appearance that the justice system is being used politically to try to stop Trump. The perception even backs Trump's new slogan, pasted on his profile on Truth Social. Trump says this: "They're not coming after me, they're coming after you. I'm just standing in the way." And that seems to be the real sentiment coming out with all this. And this big unspoken reality for 2024, the real big thing, folks, there are two topics that Republican voters care about, the two that are front and center. One of them is stopping woke culture. What's the other one? Well, the other one is putting an end to government corruption. And that means being part of the establishment is now a toxic label, at least for Republicans. Not pushing back hard enough on woke politics is seen as an endorsement of child abuse, of racial division, of all these terrible things. And not taking a strong enough stance against the weaponization of justice, that is now being viewed as an injustice. And it's potentially because of this that Ron DeSantis is now saying that the corporate media wants Trump to be the nominee. Now, again, it's that toxic affiliation with the establishment media in this case. But is that really how things are? Well, let's look at the facts. The Murdoch media empire tends to represent the front line in Republican establishment media. And they actually began distancing themselves from Trump back when Democrats were making allegations over his role in the January 6th protests when they had the committee. Fox News and Wall Street Journal looked like they were going to be dropping support for Trump. They made statements on this, some of them. New York Post even came out in July of 2022 with a post from its editorial board, and they declared this: Trump has proven himself unworthy to be this country's chief executive again, meaning couldn't be president again, essentially. Now, news outlets on the left, meanwhile, have generally maintained their total hatred of Trump. They've never really veered off from that. But something happened. Something big happened. Well, first came the Alvin Bragg charges against Trump. The media, with Alvin Bragg, shifted their whole focus, the whole machine, and Trump became the biggest story in the country. And then what happened? CNN broke ranks. They held a town hall interview with Trump. Other news outlets lashed out at the network. They were saying, why are you giving Trump a platform? But then the other networks watched as CNN's ratings surged. Now, it's possible the bump on the charts, the Trump bump, we can call it, left them salivating for the good old days when Trump's news really ruled the headlines. Readers and viewers flocked to them to watch and to read. It echoed back to what Trump frequently told the media when he was president, that they needed him and that they would fail without him. That's what he used to say. Now, shortly after the CNN town hall, Fox News even announced that it would begin airing Trump's campaign rallies, which is a big shift for that network. Now, maybe Ron DeSantis is right. The corporate media want Trump, or at least they can't help but cover Trump. But really, maybe it's more of an abusive relationship type of support. They hate him, but they need him.